recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for this committee and Administrative Power. It's great to see you, but even more so, it's just been great to work with you and your extraordinary team who probably does not get the kind of attention and gratitude they deserve as well. So it's just, I'm grateful that you're here. Listening to some of my colleagues, I share their urgency and an urgency I know you share to deal with this gruesome, awful, tragic humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The urgencies are paramount to deal with the challenges, not just with the food insecurity and the near famine-like conditions, but also the medical needs, the trauma. There's no way we can ever get to the peace and strength in that region that we urgently need, or the independence and strength of the Palestinian people relies upon us addressing this crisis, and I'm grateful for your focus. But so many of the things that I'm saying also could be said about what's going on in Sudan right now. And it's a crisis in terms of proportion that's perhaps the fastest growing humanitarian crisis on the planet right now, at a scale and number that are even difficult to get your head around. As you know, the conflict is causing a spiraling towards mass famine in the Darfur region, which is accelerating the refugee problem into surrounding nations. As the chairman just said, I was in Sudan and have now talked to many leaders within the State Department as well as other aid workers who've been to that where I've been, and all of us have the same thing. We've seen refugee camps from Syrian refugees in Jordan to, I've been around this globe, but none of us have seen anything like the level, the scale, the ocean of human crisis that we witnessed there. And what compounds this problem is it's not just the hunger crisis and the famine-like conditions, the increasing numbers, and about 90% of the people you see are women and children, and the growing numbers of people that are malnourished, facing starvation who come, but the endemic nature of the sexual violence that is also really apparent. And so we've talked about this in private conversations, but the desperation of the aid workers I encountered who don't know where the next resources are going to come from. Their needs are less than 10% funded. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that. And then the other area of questioning I want to do is you're dealing with a population that has been so traumatized and victimized and brutalized that the need is not just food and water, which is so apparent in that area that I witnessed in Adre, but I'm wondering how we can begin to address some of the larger issues of trauma that are so destabilizing the Sahel in general, that really put us into a crisis after Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, that had everybody that I visited in that region really concerned about how this crisis is going to further destabilize a region if we don't begin to address the full needs of the community of people who are suffering.
Well, I thank you, Senator, for traveling there, for also the number of senators who've spoken while you were out of the room about your trip and you briefing on the trip, and the impression you've made on your colleagues, is part of what we need more of. There's not enough focus. It's a very hard time now to get attention, irrespective of the gravity of harm that you're suffering on planet Earth, because the needs are so substantial, up 40% this year from last year, and they were up last year from the year before, and it's the pace of increase is really staggering. There's very little good news or positive I can say, I guess, about Sudan, except, I think you have engaged a lot with our new special envoy. Fundamentally, there has to be a political agreement. We're not going to humanitarian aid our way out of this humanitarian crisis. The guns have to fall quiet. Even a ceasefire, a protracted ceasefire would be something, would allow more access. So I'm grateful that Special Envoy Periel is on the case, and UN Special Representative also now have an empowered Special Envoy Lamamra. So that's politically, I think, it's again, just a process point. It doesn't get us anywhere until it does, but I think it's better than not having that senior engagement. There's also a pledging conference that the French are convening in Paris, as you probably know, on April 15th. So I mentioned that the U.S. government has given almost $1 billion over the last year, 600 million of which is from USAID, but we have not seen other donors step up and do their share. Again, everything is connected to everything else. With the war in Gaza, they might be funding UNRWA in a way that we are not, and they may say that when we say, what about Sudan? And so it's very, very complicated just given the level of global need. But I absolutely share your assessment and sense of urgency. And on the psychosocial, just briefly, this is again the challenge, which is the sheer number of people dependent on, as you said, basic food and water or medicine to stay alive, and all programs come out of the same pot of money. In order not to carry their trauma and become potentially destabilizing members of their own community or be susceptible to recruitment or just to suffer for the rest of their lives, we need to supplement these life-saving interventions with life-changing and healing psychosocial support. We have programs like that in Sudan, but they're quite modest, again, given the access issues and the primacy of keeping people alive to get to the point where we can hopefully do some of that follow-on care.
I just want to be respectful of my colleague from Illinois, but just ask one more question. But in the town of Adre on the border of Sudan and in Chad, Chad's already one of our top 10 lowest income countries. Less than 10% of the country is even electrified. And for people, it's so urgent for me to let folks understand that you even have Chad folks suffering such poverty going to see if they can get aid from the places that are being set up to deal with Sudan and Sudan refugees. It's such an interwoven crisis that could really affect that region. And so investments in humanitarian aid are really investments in economic security, political security, and basically dollars invested in supporting these populations save tremendously more dollars, not to mention the efforts of global competitors like Russia trying to exploit these areas. And so I guess the one thing I will ask you, and then yield to my colleague, if you could just, I'm trying to get you on the record, and this implication for the world as well as for what I saw in Chad and the town of Adre is the supplemental. And a lot of people are casting the supplemental in terms of Indochina, in terms of Israel, Gaza, in terms of Ukraine. And these are all incredibly urgent moments that capture a lot of the attention of the public. But when it comes to the supplemental's urgency for what we see on the continent of Africa and the urgent importance of the continent of Africa, could you just speak to that, why keeping the humanitarian aid is so critical in the global context, but specifically for Africa?
If you could be brief, we would appreciate it.